the 2023 class has been building for years, and this is the first mock draft I've been a part of, John. I'm so excited to actually draft these players, talk about them, and get into it with you. It's man, I'm ready.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, I believe that I'm here just to really muddy the waters for us, because we've got a lot of quarterbacks. I love quarterbacks. So, I mean, you and I have this very congenial relationship. I hope that we're going to be able to get past this, because here's the thing. You and I we usually agree on just about everything. But when it comes to this rookie class, in particular here at the very top of this class, we're going to jump into pick 1.01 and start talking a little bit of strategy here, because we already kind of disagree on this one.
So I won the coin toss,
yep.
And I'm going to take Bijan Robinson at the 1. And I know I see your face already. It's not the quarterback. You're the QBX, the Superflex dude. The reason why, and again, it's not in every situation, and this is something we should talk about, but the reason why I'm taking Bijan Robinson at the 101 as the 101 and 101 with a bullet is because out of the 8 years that I have been doing rookie film evaluation, Bijan Robinson is in the top 5 running backs that I've ever looked at. So that's names like Saquon Barkley. It's names like Christian McCaffrey. It's names like Dalvin Cook. It's names like Jonathan Taylor. And then the name is Bijan Robinson. And he is that dude. He's that level of player. And so for me, in order for me to take a quarterback there, it's got to be a difference-making quarterback. And while there are some really good quarterbacks in this class, and I think there are, there's nobody who makes that top-level difference. There's not the elite quarterback that Bijan Robinson gives you that positional difference, that advantage.
Yeah, and I fully agree with that, by the way. So the only problem being that, if you don't have your quarterback position set in your Superflex league. Now, if we were talking in a vacuum, I'm right there with you. And in fact, my goal is going to be to get my rosters in Superflex Dynasty leagues in a position where I can justify taking Bijan Robinson 101. If I have 101, that's the pick that I want to make. But, there a lot of people earned 101, and, they did it with, putrid quarterback play more than anything. We know that, what a difference quarterback can make in a dynasty league. So, in a Superflex league in particular. So, if you've got them, you were in the playoffs. If you don't have them, you're probably in that 101 neighborhood. So it makes it really tough. I think a lot of people are going to struggle with this a little bit. They're going to be told you rubber stamp Bijan Robinson is 101. And there are going to be a lot of people like, okay, but like, how do I fix quarterback? And, there's a certain amount of analysis out there that's just going to say, well, you try and trade 101. And I know that this is something that you're going to be able to, you personally are going to be able to execute in some leagues, but it's not going to work in every league for every person. But essentially it's going to be trade 101 for, that transformative quarterback for you that fixes the position for you. And if you can't, draft Bijan Robinson and then trade him for a quarterback later.
Yeah.
And I just really question if that's going to be a viable option for most people.
So I guess then to me, you have multiple options, because again, picks until you make that pick, picks can be anything. Yep. And so you have that fluidity that's part of the value of picks is you can trade them, and whoever trades for that pick, that becomes whatever they want. Bijan being the gem of this class. So if you're in a league that is pretty active, and you think that you can get quarterbacks, I think you're starting to look at guys like Trevor Lawrence as a target for Bijan Robinson. I don't think that's unreasonable. But if you can't do that, this class has such a good group of quarterbacks that I think you can get multiple picks in this draft class for Bijan Robinson and then start to build that way. I mean, that I'm certainly not averse to. One of my kind of thesis pillars is I identify a draft class when I'm rebuilding. And I try to get 2 years out and identify a good draft class because that's how I rebuild. I reload in a draft class. Well, 2023 has been one of the classes that we've identified. And you've got a unique situation where Bijan Robinson, a running back, is at the top of consensus for Superflex, that you can get multiple picks in the first round of this class. So you could end up with Bryce Young or CJ Stroud plus somebody. You could end up with, 2 players plus Will Levis or, one of these other Anthony Richardson. Like, you can do that. And there's a little more nebulousness to drafting a rookie quarterback. It's not it's not Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, we know what he's going to be. It's not Dak Prescott. We know what he is. But it's still a way to rebuild, give yourself multiple pieces in a great class and add value to your team, even though you're not taking Bijan. So like there are ways to play this. I do think, man, as soon as Bijan Robinson is drafted in the NFL, he is the running back 1 in Dynasty. And I don't think there's any question about it.
Huh. But you had Jonathan Taylor is a better prospect, right?
Yeah, but not as good a pass catcher. So it's an interesting, and again, the age factor in Dynasty, especially with running back. So Jonathan Taylor's at a point now where I trade players. I'll draft, and Bijan will be there in 2 years with a running back. Mm-hmm. So what I look for in a running back is I want to get a running back who's that top end. I want to get 2 years worth of points out of him, and then I want to trade for really nice, young, proven wide receivers and just continue to have my team be a juggernaut, because running backs hit quickly in, as rookies, and they're easy to identify because you're going to see where they go. You're going to see they have a path to volume. And so it's easy to identify. Bijan Robinson, unless he ends up behind, if just hypothetically, like this would never happen, but if San Francisco drafted him, all of a sudden that hurts Bijan. But if he goes somewhere where they need a running back, which the NFL should be smart enough by now to know that running back is either a luxury pick or you got to have it, so let's go get this guy. Bijan Robinson should be, you got to have it, so let's go get this guy. And so he should plug right in and be a starter, have volume, get points. And so that's what I'm looking for in one of these backs.
Does it concern you at all, the possibility of him? And I mean, I guess first we would kind of have to qualify it by identifying poor landing spots. But I wouldn't go. He's pretty close to landing spot dependent, but there are a few places that we've seen be pretty terrible for running backs. I hate to pick on your favorite team, but man, I hate it. I hate it when a position player lands with the New England Patriots. But I think a lot of people are are thinking Buffalo looks like a pretty good landing spot. I don't see it that way.
I would be worried about Buffalo because their running back 1 is wearing 17.
Right, exactly. And I was going to say Philadelphia is another one, and it's the exact same thing. The quarterback alone is kind of cannibalizing. Forget about the running back by committee, which both teams do employ, but just the fact that the quarterback is going to cannibalize the workload for a running back. So there are a few spots that could be pretty bad for Bijan Robinson. Does that sway you at all on him? The fact that we don't know yet where he's going to go, but there's some there's some bad spots.
It doesn't sway me.
Okay.
I think you're going to see him be another one of the running backs that go in the first round, which again doesn't happen as much anymore. The second round is the new first round. I keep seeing that, but I think he is in that echelon of really elite running backs. And people ask me if I'm worried about missing on him. And you got to go back to Bishop Sankey, who wasn't even this level of prospect, but was the running back one before you miss on one of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was Gurley, it was Zeke, it was Saquon, it was anybody in the 2017 class. I had CMC up. A bunch of people had Dalvin Cook up. Even if you were a Leonard Fournette guy, like he's been really good. So we just don't miss on this level of prospect. Because it's really easy to identify from a film perspective, from a metric perspective, and also the NFL is not real creative. They love to establish the run, and when they see a guy that they can establish the run with, they're going to do it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. He consolidates whatever backfield he steps into. It's just, kind of what does that look like? But yeah, I mean, for the most part, and I think he's going to go, like I keep seeing mock drafts where he's going kind of at the end of the first round, Josh Jacobs, Clyde Edwards-Helaire type territory. And I think he's top half of the first round, and I think that puts him in a pretty good spot.
Yeah,
honestly. And we're not going to spend this much time on every single pick. We want to get through an entire first round for you in this episode. Although we've been given the go ahead from our boss and producer Sal Stefanelli to take as much time as we need on this, but I feel like the Bijan Robinson pick 101 is going to be it's going to be a really tricky one, and I think it's going to kind of vex some people over the next few months, trying to figure out, because there are some very good quarterbacks behind him as well. So it's going to feel tough, and I think a lot of people feel pretty pot committed to taking Bijan. So, if we're kind of strategizing as far as, how do you maximize the value on 101 without making that exact pick? I think that's something that we could do that could be very useful to some people. So I guess my curiosity would be,
so what are you getting for, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but what are you getting for one of those like second tier quarterbacks? You're probably getting 3 first round picks, right? So you want 102 or 103, you want a 106, 107, and you want something at the back end. Like that's what, and if you can do better than that, awesome. But that to me, if I can add Bryce Young, if I can add Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and then I can add somebody at the back end like a Kayshon Boutte or a Charbonnet or a Josh Downs or somebody that I'm interested in that I think is going to help my team, I'm in.
Okay. That was honestly, that was going to be my question, is kind of, what type of package actually gets you to move it. And I guess, the question still remains, like, what's the point where you dig in your heels and you say, this is my best and final? It's got to include either 102 or 103. Like, it has to start there, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, otherwise, what are you doing? If your team has earned the 101 and you're quarterback needy and you're not getting a quarterback back for Bijan Robinson right now, then it doesn't make sense to trade him, because his value is going to go up as soon as he lands somewhere, or as soon as he starts to play and people realize that he is in that echelon of, he really reminds me of, as a runner, Dalvin Cook with a little more power. So like that ability to get outside and get the edge, and the ability to like teleport cut, you know what I mean? Like he'll plant, cut, and change direction completely within the flow of a play, and he'll leave a defender 4 yards that way, which was absolutely what Dalvin did in college. I remember watching him going, this is going to be fun. Bijan Robinson's got even a little bit more power, a little more pop, a little more run through an arm tackle than Dalvin did. And so that type of player, you're either getting your quarterback to fix your team, or hey, I can be stubborn because eventually somebody is going to make that move. Eventually somebody is going to need Bijan. Somebody's going to get, I mean, the other part of it is, and I hear Russ Fisher Dynasty Outhouse in my head, this is the non-point scoring season. You don't need to start a lineup right now. So you're just adding value. And there is not a piece in this class more valuable than the 101 Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, it's probably true. I did a podcast episode talking, though, about how draft for value, trade for need. I mean, I heard that from Russ Fisher first before I heard it anywhere else, and loved it. And I still believe that in the startup. That's where quarterback extreme comes from. That's where loading up on the quarterbacks comes from, because not only do they have the most value in the startup, but once the startup is over, oh my God, like you can't touch most quarterbacks, when it comes to value. So when there are no other quarterbacks available to you, and I think that still can carry over to the rookie draft a little bit, but for me, I still just have a tough time with it, just because, this is kind of our one chance to, at a reasonable cost, fix some needs, fill some holes. I mean, everybody needs running backs. Like we know that. So it can still, we can still say Bijan Robinson has just a ton of value because he fills a need that absolutely everyone has. Like, I don't care what your running backs look like. Right. You need Bijan Robinson. Maybe you also need some quarterbacks. Maybe you need some wide receivers. There are a lot of ways, even in this draft class, there are a lot of ways to fix wide receivers. So, we can deprioritize them, but you have an opportunity to fix some needs without being, kind of held for ransom by, Superflex dude with all his quarterbacks, and you need one. You don't have to, like, you've got 101. Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are coming out. Now you don't have to pay my price to trade for a quarterback. You just draft one. Right. With this pick that you just kind of woke up with. You didn't have to do anything you didn't have to give up anything. I mean, you gave up your season essentially, but
well, but again, we talked about that pick in and it's league dependent, league specific. That pick is going to be worth multiple picks. Yeah. So why take the quarterback? If you want a quarterback, make that trade. Yeah. Like, make that trade. Go get the pick that you want. Go get the quarterback that you want. Heck, if you get multiple picks in this first round, there are at least 3 or 4 quarterbacks who should be first round picks in this class. Yep. So, man, if you got multiple shots, if you need a quarterback, if that's what's going to bolster your team, if that's what is going to reinvigorate this, this destitute, last place team, then do that. But I don't think, to me, I think if you pick the quarterback at 101, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I really do. You don't have to take Bijan. You can trade that pick. But if you need a quarterback, don't take it with the 101, because the 101's worth more than that quarterback. Bijan is worth more than that one pick right now already. Yeah. Oh man, we could keep going on that. But I mean, so I just want to lay out my personal strategy on this, what it's going to look like, because I think there's an opportunity right now. What we're seeing in ADP is, basically the entire first round of a startup, we're seeing quarterbacks drafted, starting with Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen, but then it's Jalen Hurts and it's Trevor Lawrence and it's, Burrow and Herbert. And, the entire first round is just stocked with quarterbacks, because there's this feeling that there's, there's a tier of elite quarterbacks, and then there's this huge drop to everything else. And I think that there's an opportunity there to go get some of these guys pretty cheap.
I don't like Kenny Pickett, but he is ridiculously cheap. I don't really care for Daniel Jones, but again, very, very cheap. Mac Jones, I mean, give Bailey Zappi as well, but just capture that position. But these guys are insanely cheap right now, and just give me 3 of those guys, that type of person, that type of player, without trading away my 101. I fix the quarterback position for at least a year. All I need is a year or 2 of job security from these 3 guys. And now I can justify taking Bijan Robinson. I don't even have to stop and wonder if I'm doing the right thing.
See, now you're playing, instead of QBX, you're playing my strategy. You're playing XQB. You're playing all these guys who are going to be out of the league in 3 years. And that's what I tend to do. Like you and I, if we played in a league together, it would be beautiful because we would just help each other out with our strategies, because you'd be taking all the quarterbacks at the top and I'd be bottom feeding all the quarterbacks, and it would be beautiful.
Every year I've, just before my guys expire, I just toss them over to you and you get them at a discount. And
I will say the interesting thing about the quarterback position right now, and you mentioned the top tier of quarterbacks, 8 of the top 10 scoring fantasy quarterbacks this year were top 10 in rushing yards. And 6 of the top 6 ran for over 350 yards. Like all 6 of them.
Wow. Okay.
So
we need some mobility.
Yeah, well, that's a thing. So again, if I'm looking at this quarterback class, that's something I'm keeping in mind when I'm making my moves. Just saying.
Yep. Which brings us right to pick number 2. That's a perfect segue into I kind of wrestled with this. Because both of these quarterbacks, I think, check a lot of boxes. I think I don't totally know how to split hairs between these guys, and I'm kind of curious what you've come up with based on your player evaluations. Best in the business, by the way. Like this is this is why I wanted to work with you on this, because you've watched them and you've been able to dissect what they can and can't do better than anybody else that I talk to. So, but I went with Bryce Young. He's really kind of been on the, people aren't gonna quite see the comp. Stylistically, the comp isn't there. Stature-wise, the comp isn't there.
Right.
But as far as trajectory, as far as pedigree goes, he's been on the Trevor Lawrence path and Andrew Luck path since he was a teenager. So this is, and he was the number 1 quarterback, I believe number 2 overall in his recruitment class coming out of high school, and Heisman winner. He's just stayed there right at the top consistently the whole way through. People are a little bit worried about the size, sub 6 foot, sub 200 pounds. He definitely has a different stature than what we're used to from our stud quarterbacks. But, and I think that people are also going to pigeonhole him a little bit as a more of a running quarterback as a result. And that's not the case at all. I mean, he's got mobility. He's got good mobility, but from what I've seen, he uses it to extend the play and use the arm, because the arm talent is second to none.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny that people are having these concerns, because if we had something like, let's just say, like, we'll hypothetical, we'll shoot the moon. If only we had some way of knowing that he could play in the NFL, like he played in a conference that had a third of the NFL players come through it. And maybe he put up like almost 5,000 yards and maybe like, just say 47 touchdowns as a sophomore. Like if we had something like that, we could be confident that he's good.
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
Oh, it's
If
wild.
only.
Yeah, it's wild that people are worried about his size now, as if you didn't know he was small for the last 2 years that you watched him play. Like, to me, Young is a player that if you get him a clean pocket, and that's going to be the big thing. It's going to be interior offensive lineman because he's really good at moving the pocket. He's really good at getting out of the pocket. He's not very good at stepping up through traffic, and he's not good with guys right in his face. So when he gets guys right in his face, he tends to drop his back shoulder and throw high and just be like, "Get me out of here." But if he got a clean pocket, man, his patience, his deep accuracy is incredible. And even though he starts his motion funny, he starts it from down here. It's almost like Tim Lincecum. Like he starts it way down, but it's so quick that if you can, as an offensive coordinator, you can get the ball out of his hands quick enough. And he's so good at processing pre-snap and post-snap with figuring out like, all right, are they in a man or a zone? Okay, who's my first read? Who's my check down? He's so good at that and so accurate. It just seems to me that Young is a textbook NFL quarterback. He puts the ball on receivers where they can make extra yardage, they can make plays. It's just really fun. He struggles with that interior pressure. If he's got the imminent defender in his face, he drops his back foot, drops his shoulder, which makes the ball come up. His decision making tends to be proportional to like the space he's got. Like if he's got a lot of space, lights out. Like you're not going to stop him. If he gets a guy up in his face, he may be trying to make one of those little like dumb sidearm things like he's Patrick Mahomes and he's not, that sort of thing, or he's trying to flip it out. But ultimately, man, he's a really good prospect. And he is my QB1. It's close. Like he and Stroud are like, it's close, but I think he's the guy and he's real good.
Is there a knock on him that you've seen? And again, to me, the stature thing, like it's low hanging fruit. I don't know that we necessarily worry about that. If he lands in a spot where he's got a bad offensive line and he's taken a lot of hits, then we start, we get a little concerned. But again, I mean, he's great in the pocket. He's great at extending the plays. He's got a very good feel for the pressure coming. So I'm really not worried about his ability to defend himself.
And the other thing he does that I love, and it's a weird thing to have as a positive, he'll throw the ball away.
Yeah.
And to me, in the NFL, the best quarterbacks in the NFL, you're going to love this because we're going to talk Aaron Rodgers for just a second. The best quarterbacks, the best quarterbacks in the NFL are smart enough to say, okay, I have nothing on this play. I'm going to throw it out of bounds, or I'm going to throw it at the feet of my running back, and I'm going to do something on the next play because I'm that good. I can do something on third down. It's fine. And he does that. And so if you look at his completion percentage, it's a little lower than the other guys. But he's also the guy who throws the ball away when it's intelligent to do so. And I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like I got this right, choosing between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. But like you said, it's close. I mean, I was kind of typing in CJ Stroud and ultimately went back to Bryce Young. So here's kind of the problem with the quarterback position is just historically. I mean, we can go back to the year 2020 and completely shoot holes in this, but historically what tends to happen is you get one quarterback out of a draft class that's, relatively deep like this one is, that hits to a pretty big level, and it's usually not the guy you expect to do it. Then you have another guy who hits, to like kind of like a a top 12 type of quarterback, like it, and that's really kind of his upside. You get a lot of that, and then everybody else just kind of busts. So if we look back on it, 5 years down the road, and I tell you, I just traveled in time 5 years down the road, and I come back here and tell you, Zach, guess what? Bryce Young busted. He was the bust, as it turns out. Why would you? What would your assumption be of why that happened?
You'd have to be on a team with a bad offensive line.
Yeah,
Like that would be it. It would be the bad offensive line. If he's got to run for his life all the time, if he can't sit in the pocket, then he's not able to use some of his best assets, which are being able to process, having the patience to let a route develop downfield, and then putting the ball on guys downfield. And so that to me is the big downfall is he's really reliant on having a good offensive line. He did at Alabama. I mean, they did a great job, but when pressure broke down, and you saw that against teams like Georgia, you saw teams be able to get to him every now and then, and so that's the real big. He's dependent on those big guys up front, and especially the interior of that offensive line, because he doesn't deal well with pressure in his face. And you said earlier he's not a running quarterback. He's
right.
not. Like he's a good runner, but he's not a run first quarterback. He's a run as a last resort quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. My bet with both of these guys is that we're going to see them run quite a bit more once they, at least in year one. And part of it is I fully expect both Young and Stroud to end up on teams that don't protect nearly as well. They also aren't going to have the weapons. Like this is my big concern with both of these guys. And when I say big, I mean, it's all relative. I'm not worried about these two as prospects at all. But if you were to tell me that Bryce Young busted, I would wonder, all right, so where was he drafted? And was he, I mean, you kind of develop that comfort a little bit playing for Alabama and Nick Saban, playing behind, like you said, the offensive line, having the weapons to throw to. It's a very different thing when you land on the Houston Texans and you're throwing to Nico Collins and Chris Moore, or Indianapolis with an offensive line that's basically Quentin Nelson and not a whole lot of nada, So like that's a little bit of my concern. I mean, these guys have won at every level, but they've been at, the best program available, whether it was in college or even in high school. These guys were playing for state championships. These guys were playing for national championships. They're not used to being on a team that's going to struggle to get to 500.
Right.
That's going to be kind of my concern with these guys, is that they haven't faced the adversity that they're about to face by going in the top, 5 picks of the first round of the NFL draft.
Yeah, I get that. But that's also what makes them leaders. I mean, you get in there, you change the culture, especially as a quarterback. You change the culture of that locker room, and then it's up to the general manager to say, okay, I have a rookie quarterback with a rookie salary. I have some room to play, with the cap to put people around him to help him succeed. And then like you see that now in the NFL. I think aside from Patrick Mahomes and his contract, like most quarterbacks are below 13% of the salary cap, like success, like winning Super Bowls. Like you're seeing guys come in on rookie deals and you have people put around them. I mean, Josh Allen, all of a sudden Stephon Diggs comes in and you shore up that offensive line and you change the offense a little bit and you open it up. Like, I think that's the new. The NFL is going to figure this out eventually. We've been talking about it for 3 years, you and I, maybe longer. Like the NFL is going to figure out that you just keep re-racking rookies until you build your team, and then let's go.
Yep.
And so that to me is the hope, is somebody figures out that here's Bryce Young on a rookie deal. Now we got to put some pieces around him.
Yep. Man, Chicago should really they should really consider that move. But yeah. So yeah, like I said, CJ Stroud was almost the pick for me.
Well, so he's the pick for me. So at the 103, I am going to take CJ Stroud and be very happy getting the Ohio State quarterback. I think he does more for himself than Bryce Young does. So Bryce Young kind of relies on his own athleticism. Stroud does a great job stepping up, climbing the pocket, allows the play to extend that way, where if you get an interior rush, they're going around him and he steps through and now has a little more time. He's mobile enough within the confines of the pocket, will run a little bit. He's similar to Young that way, where Stroud will run if he has to, run if he can get a first down, but it's not the primary weapon. He does this really cool thing where Stroud has this incredible ability to keep track of what's going on downfield while he's escaping trouble in the pocket. So like you'll see him avoid a rush and then roll out and then all of a sudden just throw. And you're like, what? You don't even know where and it's right on the money 40 yards down the field. And you have no idea how he even kept track while he was escaping, but he's really good at doing that. I think the things that he struggles with is he'll be too patient. So he'll hold the ball back in the pocket, hoping that somebody will make a play. He wants to try to make a play, and instead of taking off, he'll get hit. And it's like, 4 seconds is a little long to be holding it back there. The NFL is going to come get you in a little bit less than that. And when he gets receivers open underneath, sometimes rather than like throwing it, somebody somewhere told him he needs to have touch. And so like you can see him, it's almost like a little league kid when they start aiming, and he'll underthrow it because he's trying to have touch instead of just getting the ball to the receiver. But man, again, he had a 4,000 yard season with 44 touchdowns. Last season, he had 3,600 yards and 41 touchdowns. He's just a good quarterback. Yes, he's had a bunch of good weapons, but he's also gotten the ball to all of those good weapons. I mean, he got the ball to Olave and Wilson. He got the ball to Jaxon, Smith-Njigba. This past season, he got it to Emeka Boutte and Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, he's done some things. He even made Jeremy Ruckert look really nice and drafted by the Jets. But, like, he's another good quarterback. My fear with both Stroud and Young is they're not great quarterbacks. So they don't have that rushing ability to put them up in that for fantasy. And and again, when I evaluate, I'm evaluating for fantasy, not for the NFL. If you're evaluating these guys for the NFL, absolutely, let's do it. Like they're not making mistakes. They're completing, 65% plus of their passes, both of them. That's exactly what you want as an NFL team. In fantasy, we're looking for that. Plus, we want some rushing ability.
Yeah, ideally. I like more than anything, give me some job security, and these guys will have that because, I mean, they're pro ready. Like these are both guys who step in day one as starters, basically wherever they go. And all of the things that you have to spend time coaching into rookie quarterbacks, these guys they've already been through that boot camp, so they're ready to go. But yeah, they're for the pro game, we're definitely we're feeling pretty confident that these are franchise type guys. But yeah, there's and again, this is speculative on my part. I just have a feeling that again, you get them away from those offensive lines that are built entirely out of blue chip prospects. Get them away from Wilson, Olave, Harrison, Jaxon, Smith-Njigba. Like you get them away from all of those amenities, and now you throw them into Houston or throw them into Chicago, where it's Darnell Mooney is kind of your that's all you really have, Chase Claypool, I guess. Put them in some of these spots, and let's see how patient CJ Stroud is willing to be after getting hit by an edge defender once or twice because nobody can get open for him.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's definitely it. Like as a GM, your job is not done drafting one of these players.
Mhm.
Your job has started
Yeah.
drafting one of these players. Now you have to put the pieces around him to let him be successful. And if you're looking at like the path that has been successful, you're looking at putting pass catching running backs. You're looking at putting guys that make plays out of the slot, get open quickly, and you're looking at pass catching tight ends to be able to take away some of that pressure. If you're getting the ball out quick, you don't have to be making decisions. You don't have to be running for your life. And play action. I mean, that how much better was Justin Fields in the second half of that season when they let him run play action and when they let him bootleg?
Right.
Like, hey, this is his strengths. Like his strength is not stand back there in the pocket and wait and throw. Like his strengths are move the pocket, and so you've got to do that as an NFL team. And most teams, some teams don't. I won't say most. We're getting there. We're getting there.
We're getting there. With pick 104, I'm keeping us at the quarterback position and taking Anthony Richardson, which I'm a little bit of a reach, right? I think for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I think that we're probably going to see we're doing this obviously in late February. We have no idea where these guys are going to land. They haven't even done the combine yet. So we're missing a lot of information. So I really kind of default to quarterbacks when that's the case. But there's a very good chance that once we have some landing spots, several wide receivers and running backs and possibly even a tight end could sneak into this 104 range. It's also very possible that Will Levis, quarterback Will Levis could end up in this range as well. And in fact, I think for a lot of people, he probably is right now. I think that that's part of the reach is I'm reaching past Will Levis for Anthony Richardson. But I also think that, from your perspective, it's probably more that I'm reaching past the wide receivers and running backs than Will Levis. That's my guess.
Yeah, there are a couple wide receivers that I like here, but I will say that the theory behind taking Anthony Richardson here is very sound. It is the theory behind what led me to take Lamar Jackson over everybody in that class. When you had Baker and like that, it was still Lamar Jackson in fantasy football. It was the same thing that led me to Jalen Hurts in his class. It's again a guy who put up 650 yards rushing, and he's a project. Like you watch him play quarterback, and you look at. I mean, he only completed 54% of his passes this year, and you'll have plays where you're just trying to figure out what Anthony Richardson is doing, and then all of a sudden he'll make a play, and you're like, just do that. Like, that was awesome. And so it's a little bit of a squint. It's a little bit of a dream. I don't think he's as complete as Hurts or Lamar Jackson were coming out. I think the fun thing. So Lamar Jackson, the big knock on him was he didn't go through progressions.
Yeah.
If you watched his last year at Louisville, he absolutely did. He started. His first instinct was not to take off. His first instinct was, okay, 1, 2. All right, now I'm gone. And just that little switch, just that little progression made him immensely better and more ready to be in the NFL. And I think Hurts was underrated as a thrower. I said that when he came out. I thought he was good. I think, again, the pieces are there for Richardson and the upside, and we love that phrase in Dynasty, upside. But it's true, especially with quarterbacks. You get the rich rebar, the Konami code, the ability to run. And I just talked about it. All 6 of the top 6 quarterback scorers ran for more than 350 yards.
Yep.
Patrick Mahomes was the lowest, and he ran for like 356, and he was dinged up a little. Like he's really mobile, and so that to me is in fact the only two quarterbacks that didn't in the top 10 run for more than 350 yards were Cousins and Goff.
Yeah.
Like that was it. That's it. And so it's such a big piece of both today's NFL and fantasy football that to ignore it, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Now, if he doesn't get first round capital, he shouldn't be a first round rookie pick. I don't think.
That's part of it, is that he's really kind of right now, not only is he trending to be a first round pick, he's projected to go top 10 at this point. I mean, there are a lot of teams that need a quarterback. And the beauty of Anthony Richardson, as opposed to Will Levis, like you said, he's a project. They both are.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson is a type of project that it can be on the job. It can be a jump off the cliff, build the airplane on the way down type of thing. Where Will Levis, I mean, it's going to take some clipboard holding, because it's going to be his ability to digest a playbook, to make his reads, things like that. And Richardson has, some athletic gifts, some raw talent that can get him out of trouble in the meantime, while they kind of slowly bring him along as a passer. He's gonna, he's still gonna win games for them just with his legs.
Yeah, and if you want just a little bit more hope, some narrative to cling to, if you look at Florida and that coaching staff and the way they have not been able to utilize players. I mean, you look at all of the players that even Pitts was underutilized, but like that whole like crew of players that have come out into the NFL, they've all been misused, miscast, and so it's easy to tell yourself, that probably happened with Anthony Richardson too. Yeah. And you add that into all of the other potential positives. And I don't hate it. It would not be where I would go, but I fully am on board with the process in theory.
So let's see what your pick would be here.
So 105, I am going to take the wide receiver that we have been drooling over.
Yes.
For the past 2 years. If you are a real diehard, 3 years, because he made a play as a freshman on the back end of the end zone that was just like a Jedi. But at 105, I'm going to take Jaxon Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State and dance.
So I have a very important question here for you.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of something that I've been on for a couple years now. But my question to you, and this is not a player comp, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I think the comp is probably Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Yeah. That's kind of what we're hearing, the slot receiver with the route running abilities. But just in terms of kind of projections as an NFL, just as a prospect, would you say that Jaxon Smith-Njigba is closer to kind of a Garrett Wilson type of prospect, or closer to a Jamar Chase type of prospect in terms of, first of all, likelihood of hitting, but second, just kind of, I guess in 2022, the issue was we had a lot of wide receivers. It didn't feel like there was really an alpha there. And in fact, a lot of people figured if there is one, it's Treylon Burks.
Right.
Now, I mean, obviously we saw something very different once Garrett Wilson got on the field. But as a prospect, it was just kind of this big muddled mess of some very good wide receivers, but no alpha type guys. And to me, Jaxon Smith-Njigba looks to be more of that like alpha type of guy. I think we've got a couple of those.
So it's interesting. Yes. I agree with you. I think he is head and shoulders above the class from last year.
Hmm.
But I think when we're talking about alphas, and it's interesting, a lot of people, when they look at what the archetype for NFL receiver was, that's what they're thinking about as alpha. They're thinking about Calvin Johnson. They're thinking about Julio. They're thinking about Des Bryant. That's the type of player. And even Ja'Marr Chase is not quite that, but he's closer to that than what you're getting out of Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
That X receiver, the
But
size.
But I think it's evolved into this really interesting hybrid where most of the good players are players who get slid in and can create out of the slot.
Mhm.
And I think that's what you're going to see with Jaxon Smith-Njigba. He's good enough. And they used him a little bit on the outside in the bowl game when Wilson and Olave didn't play, and you saw him be successful. But he has the ability and versatility to create mismatches with speed or quickness inside instead of verticality. So, like, he's not going to be a high point guy necessarily, but man, and it to me, alpha isn't synonymous anymore with tall, and or at least it shouldn't be. Like, we still got that little zeitgeist like in the back of our head that oh, they should be, 6'4", but that's not the case. I think, and one of the things that I've looked for in wide receivers that I've been really successful in, this was identifying Juju Smith-Schuster. It was identifying Cooper Kupp. It was identifying A.J. Brown. It was identifying Justin Jefferson. Even identifying Garrett Wilson, who was my wide receiver 2 last year, is the ability to beat zones.
Mhm.
And Jaxon Smith-Njigba can do that, and he can beat them both underneath and between levels. He's really good at reading the layers, because there are points where defenders are passing off a receiver in between, parts of the zone, because you're not, man to man. You got your guy, and you're covering that player. In a zone, you're covering the player who's in your area until they're not in your area, and you're handing it to the next guy, which is why there are holes in zones. It's a cheat, because if you can sit down in between where the two players are passing you off, which Jaxon Smith-Njigba does so well, you're going to make your money right there. And so he does that. He's real sudden at the stem of routes, so he'll come up and get that real good plant, get a defender committing to one direction, and then be the other way. And so, like, he does that's like a good Iverson crossover. And he's really, which is weird, an intelligent blocker, which I know doesn't translate to fantasy points, but being intelligent and understanding the offense and understanding where you should be all the time does matter.
That keeps you on the field.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so he's really good at that. I don't think he will be used necessarily as a vertical threat. I think he's probably best suited to play out of the slot, which is going to limit your air yards and guys that look at that sort of thing. But man, he should be high volume and high catch and high fantasy points. I don't care where he lands. It's a matter of what quarterback is going to benefit from it.
I love it. Yeah, I've been excited about him, and there's at least one other guy that we're going to talk about on this episode that I've been kind of drooling to a point where it felt like you can trade out of 2022 if you're not getting Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker, right. If you're not going to take Kenny Pickett to fix a quarterback position or Superflex position, just trade out. Wait for 2023, because there are better players on the way. There's some alphas coming where right now we've got these guys are good, but they're not this.
But it's funny to listen to take the temperature of the room on Twitter or in fantasy circles, because people are looking. I was like, did you not realize that Jaxon Smith-Njigba was a slot receiver? Like, what? Right. Like, did you not? Like, he killed it. He out-targeted everybody when he was on the field with Olave and Wilson. Like, he was the guy.
Yeah.
Wow. He benefited from. No, it doesn't work like that. Good players earn targets. There's a reason why Jarvis Landry earned targets when he was playing with Odell Beckham. Like, he was good. That's a
Yep.
thing. Like AJ Brown earned targets playing with DK Metcalf. Like that's a thing. Good players get targeted. And so that's what you've got to be excited about. And it's cool because you probably don't have to take JSN at 105. You probably don't. And by the time we get through all this and he tests and he's not fast, like you're going to get a discount and it's going to be fun. But man, he's a really good player. And I think fantasy wise, he's going to be exceptional.
Yep. Absolutely agree. With pick 106, I'm taking another running back, Jahmyr Gibbs. It's such a scarce position, at least at the moment. It's so interesting. It's very cyclical, and I think we're on the way back up. The pendulum is going to swing back the other way, and it's going to swing just as far. So I know it feels like there aren't very many running backs that we can trust right now. It's on the way back though, and we're going to start getting restocked at the position starting this season. I mean, we kind of started last year with Hall and Walker and Damian Pierce to a certain extent, but this year we're going to get a heavy influx of some very talented running backs. Jahmyr Gibbs had been in the conversation, right there on Bijan Robinson's heels for the better part of a year. And finally, Bijan really kind of separated this past season, but I mean, Gibbs was right there for a lot of people. And those evaluations, especially at running back, those evaluations hold up better than any other position year to year. So, it's not that we're going to necessarily see players like Jahmyr Gibbs fall off, over the course of a season, like we do with some of these wide receivers and even some quarterbacks. I think that the pro scouts are looking at it the same way. I think they're seeing the same talent in 2022 that they saw in 2021. So
Gibbs is such a fun evaluation. Yeah. Like he's a little bit undersized. I think he's listed at 5'11", 200. I don't know if he's quite that. It'll be interesting to see what he measures up at the combine. But like, if you're talking pass catchers, which is what we want from a running back, I mean, the guy just had 44 catches for 444 yards at Alabama this year. Like, he is legit pass catcher, adds yards after the catch, is really good inside, which is funny for a smaller guy. He's got great vision, and it makes up for his lack of size. And he's very patient, which is really cool to see. He'll set up his blockers. He'll let them get out and create the hole instead of trying to run through something that's not there yet. And he does that both inside and when he gets stretch plays outside of the tackles. Is kind of, I call him an east-southeast runner. So like he starts out parallel to the line of scrimmage and uses his speed, and then he's gone upfield. So like he'll start and then go once he finds the hole. Again, I do think he's a little undersized. He's a little below average in pass protection. He stands up too straight, which is funny for a little guy because you'd think he'd be down getting leverage, but he stands up a little straight and kind of gets moved around. And I think sometimes he hesitates a little bit behind the line of scrimmage if he's trying to get out to the edge. Like he's still trying to look to get upfield. And it's like, just go. You're real fast. But he is, to me, I think the issue you're going to have with him, and it's a good issue to have, is the same issue you had where DeAndre Swift, you always wanted him to get more for carries. And it feels like that may be what the issue is going to be with Gibbs. But if he catches passes, like if a team uses him the way they should and gets him the ball out in space 50, 60 times, you're not going to miss the carries.
Is DeAndre Swift kind of the comp that you're looking at for him?
I mean, I don't, again, not necessarily play style. I think Swift is a little bigger, but in terms of how they're going to be used, everyone is going to run out and say Kamara. And I think again, I think Kamara is quite a bit bigger than what Gibbs is too. If Devin Singletary was like real good. Yeah, like that's because he's small. He can run inside even though he's small, and Singletary does that. But Gibbs as a pass catcher is just light years ahead of where Singletary is, and so it's to me. I know that you shouldn't put him in Denver, but if you put him in Denver and let Peyton just say, "Hey, we're gonna get you the ball in space as much as we can," that would be so much fun.
Yeah, they're gonna need a running back this year. Javonte Williams back from the ACL, but we've seen what back from an ACL tear looks like for running backs in that first season. So I like that one. Now that we're like roughly halfway through this, we're exactly halfway through this mock. I'm going to take us all the way back to the beginning and just do a little bit of house cleaning here. So in terms of tiers, and this is probably the biggest disagreement that you and I have on this class, because for me, those top three players, Bijan Robinson, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, I put them all in the same tier. And I know that you put Bijan Robinson in his own tier ahead of those guys, which, I think that's fair. It's just, I just don't totally agree. but then, from there, I kind of think that we got into a little bit of a tier with, Anthony Richardson, Jaxon, Smith-Njigba. And I'm kind of curious how you tier this class from there, with the information that we have now. It's interesting though, because, again, without landing spots, without draft capital right now, I really kind of put Richardson and Jaxon Smith-Njigba in that tier. And then we're breaking it again. And Jahmyr Gibbs really kind of starts the next tier. And I think that once we get landing spots and get draft capital, I think that you're going to see that tier grow quite a bit. And Jahmyr Gibbs, to me, is the most likely to make it into that tier.
I would add one more player to that tier. And if I could here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 107, I'm going to take Jordan Addison, who I think is right in that same conversation with Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Jahmyr Gibbs in that, man,
another wide receiver.
Really good, yes. And so Addison transferred to USC. Yeah. He got Kenny Pickett drafted. You're welcome, Kenny. Like Jordan Addison had 100 catches, 1,600 yards, and 17 touchdowns as a sophomore. And then transferred out to USC. Again, was good at USC, but wasn't necessarily the ultimate focal point like he was at Pitt. He was still, led the team in targets and receptions and all that sort of thing, but it was not quite as pronounced as it was at Pitt. But like, he is a player who he's so much fun to watch play with pace. He'll run out at like 90%. And you're like, man, this guy's fast. And then he'll make his move at the stem of his route. And all of a sudden he's at 100%. And the defender is trying to figure out what just happened because Addison has just cooked him post stem. He's quick in route, I would say. And again, the part of that's because of pace. But then when he's got the ball, fast. Fast with the ball. And so that was something, it's weird. This is a note that I made with Cooper Kupp, because like you watch Cooper Kupp play and you're like, he's not fast. And he's got the ball and you're like, he's running away from guys. And Jordan Addison does that same thing where like he'll cook you with quick in the route. And then when he's got it, he's like, guess what? I got this extra gear. Boom. And he's gone. He's sudden out of breaks, creates huge swaths of space. And that, to me, we get caught up in separation. And there's so many different definitions of separation. I talked about it on the Dynasty Dummies this week. to me, if you can create separation so a quarterback can see you're open, that's the separation that's on the wide receiver. Getting it to the receiver while he's still open is the quarterback's job. You know, throwing the ball where it needs to be so he stays open. But man, Addison creates that space. I think sometimes though he feels small. He does. He's 6 foot 175, but he doesn't always feel like he's that big, especially when you put him on the outside and he can be bothered by physicality. But I still think if you're talking that lowercase a alpha, that new alpha, the NFL has shifted to the Devontae Smith, the Jalen Waddle, that Jordan Addison fits right in that role.
Would that be the one of those guys be the player comp for you?
Yeah, I really see a lot of those two players. Again, he doesn't play as big at the catch point as Devontae Smith, which sounds weird because Smith, that was the big knock, was he was tiny. Smith plays big at the catch point. Addison is probably a little closer to a Waddle, but he's got just that entire game. I love it. I really think he's good.
Remember the days when USC just could not come up with a decent wide receiver? Jordan Addison owes something to Juju Smith-Schuster and Drake London. Because man, prior to the last 2 or 3 years, I was just not interested in USC wide receiver. I had been bit by way too many Marquise Lees. I was just kind of done. But yeah, like I said, this is another one of those. That's another one of those names that I think could very easily not only make it into that second or third tier, depending on, how you split up those top 3 guys. But, kind of in the pick 104 range, he could be in that conversation very, very easily.
So if I were doing this draft on my own, JSN and Addison would be 4 and 5.
Yeah.
And again, it's the way we play and your affinity for quarterbacks and mine for like the beauty of slot receivers that, it's just a different flavor that we play. But again, like I think that this just illustrates how good this class is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Speaking of that, pick 108, I took Will Levis, quarterback, because that's what I do. I take quarterbacks. Exclusively take quarterbacks. They don't even have to be good quarterbacks, because I don't think that Will Levis is a very good quarterback, at least not right now. In February of 2023, there's enough raw talent, enough arm talent, he's got the prototypical size. And so there are a lot of NFL scouts who view him as a top 10 NFL pick. And that has to compel us. That has to drive things for us, because we know the job security that comes along with that. We know that he's going to be a multi-year starter. And again, right now, that's kind of a tough thing to find. So, just on that alone, I think that Will Levis belongs in this range. He's kind of the last of the the starting quarterbacks, the first round grade type quarterbacks. And, he's going to be a little bit of a project. I'm curious what your player comp is, but I know that generally speaking, it's kind of been Josh Allen, just because of, there's the size, there's the arm strength, but there's also the fact that you got to teach him a lot to get him up to speed.
My favorite write-up so far of Will Levis has, he's got a rocket arm and he's a project quarterback, but he's got rushing ability. Do you happen to have his stats right off the top of your head? Like his 2022, he ran 72 times for negative 107 yards.
Ooh.
And 2 touchdowns.
How does that happen? I think CJ Stroud did the same basic thing. So.
Well, Bryce Young's first 2 years, he had, I tweeted out. Yeah, his first 2 years, he had like 70 carries for negative 23 yards and a touchdown. And I was like, it's nice.
Yeah, like he broke his first the first carry of, or maybe it was Stroud actually. Yeah, it was Stroud. So Justin Fields came out. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's an injury, maybe it was just we're throttling this D3 team so bad that let's get our freshmen some reps. He breaks a run for 50 yards and a touchdown and then just never runs again, basically. So yeah, yeah, those rushing I don't know. It feels like it can be misleading. But I mean,
it's what, like 107 yards backwards. That's a full football field. As
right.
again, as a senior. So it's not like he played the whole season. He was okay,
Yeah.
And again, if you're talking about completion percentage and polish and that sort of thing, ahead of Richardson in terms of like what the team did with him and the throws he was asked to make and the throws that he made. I mean, he completed almost 65% of his passes over his career.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do think that they're dreaming on that arm.
Yeah.
Like he has got an absolute hose. He doesn't always know where it's going, but it is going downfield and fast. But he doesn't necessarily like touch all the time. Like he's like, yep, this is coming as fast as I can throw it, and good luck. And he does that. Like his running, I feel so bad for his running backs because you'll see a guy get out in the flat and he'll just like throw a sinker, and it's just like and worm burner, and they're trying to make a play on it. But again, I do think that if you're dreaming on, 6'3", 222, just a big guy, I can't unsee he's wearing number 7. And so I can't unsee Taysom Hill when he starts to run, because he's got that, like, he does have that like big solid, and he doesn't slide. He's just like, I'm going to run through you and through your linebacker. And so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, he's been linked to the Colts a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the team, and it'll be interesting to see whether that they can kind of rectify the situation with a young quarterback, because they haven't been doing very well with the retreads.
Give him that Taysom Hill comp, and you just gave Sal Stefanelli his favorite player in this draft. So, so this has already been very productive.
Are we at 110 now?
109.
Oh, 109. Oh,
yeah. Let's hear
it's
it.
back to me. 109. I am going to take Quentin Johnston. And now we're at the prototypical X receiver, the big body guy. And you saw him wash up on the beach a little bit in the bowl games. Like he got a little bit tied up. Played for TCU, 6'4", 193. Again, traditional X. The thing I look for in those guys is the ability to get off press coverage, because you're going to be out on an island, and there's going to be a corner getting up and getting on you. And he has 3 distinct moves off press, which is nice. He's got a jab, he's got a hesitation, and he does a pretty good job with hand fighting, like swipe chop. Can get off press, does a good job creating space versus man, and gets over the top. Like he can be a downfield receiver against man. He's got long legs. And then against zone, he does a pretty good job sitting in throwing lanes. I think the thing that you're going to see, and this is going to be the big knock about him, is he does let the ball travel on him a lot if it's not a high point situation, which means not only do you lose that length, so now all of a sudden you're taking your arms with your 6'4" or 6'5" or 6'6" wingspan, and you're bringing them into your body. So now the defender is closer to the ball, but you also have the issue of the ball hitting your pads or your chest. And so that I don't love. I don't think he's going to see volume at the next level, which scares me. I think you're going to have to see him make big plays, which he can, but he's not the type of receiver I typically gravitate toward. He just happens to be the best of what the next tier is. So we're almost into what I would consider the lightning round.
Mhm.
Like it's like Quentin Johnston and maybe one other guy, and then we're into, we're taking some stabs and having fun with it.
Who's the player comp? And I also have. Are we getting to a spot here? Specifically with Quentin Johnston, actually, where is it going to be kind of landing spot dependent, kind of draft capital dependent, or are you going to feel comfortable with him regardless of where he lands?
I'm still taking him. So he's still one of the top 7 players that I'm pretty confident in, but he's like the last of the players and the least confident of those 7 players that I'm confident in. And I do think that he needs to be on a team where you've got a quarterback that will throw the ball when players aren't necessarily open. So you saw Dak Prescott not be able to do that. So you saw Des Bryant still have gas left in the tank at the end of his career, but Dak was not a throw him open guy. He was a quarterback who needed to see separation, which is why Amari Cooper was so great there. It's why CeeDee Lamb is so great there. You need somebody who will, for lack of a better term, degaff that throw. Like just go back and fire it up there and let Quentin Johnston go get it because he can. And so somebody like Herbert. So if you landed him in LA with the Chargers, or that type of quarterback, somebody who will throw it and throw it downfield. I also think the interesting thing about Quentin Johnston to me is he's like halfway between N'Keal Harry and DK Metcalf, where like he's not quite as physical as DK Metcalf, but he's great separation down the field and does some of those things that Harry couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also really good in the intermediate short stuff where if you get him the ball in space, he's actually real twitchy and can create after the catch. And that was something N'Keal Harry actually did well. It was why I was excited that he went to the Patriots, because I was like, Bill's going to see that. Belichick's going to use him as a big
He's
slot.
He's going to love that. Yeah.
So again, I think Quentin Johnston has some versatility to his game. You look at him and you're like, wow, he's just a big guy. He's going to go out and run deep, and that's fine. He can do that. He's good at that, but he's also good at creating underneath if you get him in space. Now, I have an issue with, and he was okay with pop passes and jet sweeps, but I don't love him because I think if you get him going horizontally, if you get him going with the line of scrimmage, he doesn't turn up field well. So I would rather get him in space and let him do his thing.
I've got a guy who I still feel, and I mean, I might be just kind of the last one, the last holdout. It's closing time. The lights just came on and everything, and I'm still sitting there, just shooting my shot here. But I still believe in Kayshon Boutte, so I'm going to take him here at pick 10, wide receiver from LSU, which there's back to the narrative piece, USC being the anti wide receiver U. I mean, you could make the argument for LSU or Ohio State being wide receiver U, but LSU puts out, they're just a factory for these X receivers, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, and Kayshon Boutte is just kind of the next generation of this, of this process that they have just absolutely mastered down there in Louisiana State. So, but I mean, a year ago at this time, we were talking about, man, if he comes out, if he declares for this year's draft, he is by far, and again, deep class of wide receivers, a lot of guys we really liked, Burks and Wilson and Olave, and it was Jamison Williams. It's just this very deep class of wide receiver. And at the time, Boutte was just kind of head and shoulders above all of those guys as a prospect. So I'm not totally sure what happened, over the course of the last year. I know there was an ankle injury. It sounds like we now have a little bit of character issues to worry about, but maybe you've got some more insight to sprinkle onto this as to why Kayshon Boutte just kind of fell out of grace the way he has. Because to me, I honestly have him right there with Jaxon, Smith-Njigba as a potential wide receiver 1 in this class.
And he could be like, that's the cool thing about this class. And again, it's being knocked for not being deep, and it's being knocked for not being as good as we thought. Well, we're really just bored. Like, that's it. We've been talking about it for 2 years and we're bored. But like, Kayshon Boutte came out as a freshman, was just a world beater, was pretty good in limited in his second year. Like you said, got nicked up, had double ankle surgery, not great.
Mm-hmm.
Had quarterback issues, also not great. Had off-field dalliances, we'll say, not great. Nothing legal.
So the hat trick.
Yeah, nothing legal, but not you wouldn't want to take him home to your mom, that sort of thing. And so the fact that he didn't play as well as you expected him to, you want to see a progression. And that's when I start watching film, I start watching early stuff, and I watch 2 or 3 games of early stuff, and I watch 2 or 3 games of stuff in the middle of a career, and then I'll watch 6 to 8 games at the end of a career. And to see that progression, and with Kayshon Boutte, the progression wasn't there. Like, he's good. And I'm not going to be disappointed if I am in a rookie draft and I come away with Kayshon Boutte, especially down here at 110. Like, I'm not going to be disappointed. He can be very quick in route when he wants to be. Doesn't always want to be. Frustrating. I think he's got several double moves in his arsenal, which is real cool to watch, because you see him put one on a corner, and all of a sudden the corner is running a slant, and he's running a slant and go. And so he's gone. And so that you love. I think he does another guy that does a great job finding holes in zones. 6 foot 190. He's, a bigger guy. He's not very fast in route usually, and he doesn't always create separation. And that's the big issue for me with Boutte, is he doesn't always seem interested in his route. And you're like, man, I saw it as a freshman. I saw you just crush people. Why aren't you going? And I think there were issues. I think there was team chemistry issues. I think there were issues between him and the quarterback. So there's a lot of things that we're not privy to. And so I can only evaluate what I've got on film. And he also struggles with press. Again, he's not quick on the get off, and suffered some drops on really easy catches. But again, that sounds negative, and I don't mean to. I'm not raining on your Kayshon Boutte parade. Mm-hmm. He is very good, and he is a player that I am still very interested in acquiring. And the fact that you can get him at 110 in a Superflex draft is awesome. And I think it's a tribute to what there is for depth in this class.
Yeah, exactly. And it does kind of create a little bit of strategy as well, just because, like I said, I mean, the fact that you could get, Boutte with just as much, I think he's got as much upside as anybody in the class. The floor certainly isn't there. I wonder if his issue was with the quarterback was just that he was throwing left-handed. Like, stop showing off, throw it with your right hand like a normal person. But yeah, I mean, because that's the type of thing that that we've gotten pretty accustomed to that from NFL wide receivers, and NFL clubs have really kind of started to kind of get away from that type of character, I suppose. So I think that draft capital is going to be a big piece of the puzzle as well. We don't have that yet, but I kind of think that that's going to end up being a pretty big knock against him. I think they're going to let him drop to, I mean, he should be a day 2 pick, but man, it might be close.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to, like, if he's not in the first 4 rounds and really the first 3, but you can squint and talk yourself into 4, then, you know, things shift. And that's the reason why I do evaluation so early is I will do my pre-draft, pre-combine evaluation. So then when the NFL starts telling us what they think of those guys, I can adjust, and I'm not like scrambling, but I'm also not trying to account for all of that because the NFL is going to do that, you know, for us. The NFL is going to tell us even combine adjustments. Like the only position I will combine adjust is tight end because you want a guy who's over 240 and you want him to run under a 4.7 and be, I think it's like 6'3". Like there's a pretty good set of you know measurements that you want to hit, but other than that, the NFL is going to tell you exactly what they think of these guys when they draft them, and they can't. That's the one time they can't lie to you, so you might as well use it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of what drives everything for us, for you know, for better or for worse. Because they're not always right about this stuff, but it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They get to be wrong, and we have to just go along with it. So the thing is, you're generally not going to get me to draft rookie wide receivers, particularly in the first round. And a big part of it is just kind of strategically, you know, thinking about it strategically. There are just so many different ways to get, you know, baseline wide receiver scoring. You know, they're about there's man 30 40 guys in the NFL currently who have, you know, low end wide receiver 1 type of like that's within their range of outcomes. And then even in the when you get to the elite tiers, you get beyond Jefferson and Chase, and it really is kind of, man, any one of these guys could be the wide receiver 1 for a season and you know, kind of hang out in the top 5 type of territory. So to me, you know, Boutte really kind of represents a little bit of a value play. But beyond that, I typically gravitate away from wide receivers just because I think they're kind of cheaper ways to do it. I really kind of prefer, you know, once the quarterbacks are dried up, obviously, I really kind of prefer to get my running backs because this is really kind of the cheapest they're going to be. We always say quarterbacks are the cheapest in the startups. Well, running backs are cheapest in a rookie draft because if and when they hit, your access to them is going to be very, very limited going forward.
Well, and trade pieces.
Right.
I mean, you look at Dameon Pierce, who is probably a 3rd round pick in your rookie draft, maybe snuck into the 2nd. Isaiah Pacheco, you know, there are points where you could get 1st round picks. You probably still can for Pacheco, like, or pretty close. Like that to me is value. And I agree with you. Like in rookie drafts, I will always break ties to running backs. Always.
Nice.
So if I'm doing tiers, and I have a tier of wide receivers and a tier of running backs that is equal, I'm going to take the running back because I want the instant points and I want the return, and I'll be able to go get that receiver with the running back if they hit. And the other piece is when you build, like when I build my team, I build around wide receiver, but I have tons of running backs because a running back for a week can be a running back 1.
Yep.
And that's all you need. That's a win. And so carrying them on your roster, and it's going to bring us right in. This is beautiful. We're dovetailing in.
Exactly.
At 111, I'm going to take Zach Charbonnet, who running back, UCLA, a big body running back. And one of the few backs in this class that I think can be a 3-down back.
Mhm.
So we got a lot of running backs who are going to like spell back. They're going to be a lot of like 1A sides of a committee. They're going to be a lot of pass catchers. Zach Charbonnet, 6'1", 220, and has had multiple seasons where he's had over 20 receptions, has had multiple seasons over 1,000 yards rushing, tremendous vision between the tackles. He gets compact, which is tough for a 6'1", 220-pound guy, and runs with power and speed. I think he's got very good acceleration to begin the play and when the hole opens up. And so you see him. It's really funny to see a Mack truck of a human being all of a sudden like explode through a hole. And you're like, where did this come from? He's got good contact balance. He rarely gets squared up, and he usually can add extra, which that's something that I think is underrated, because if you see a running back get squared up, they stop. Like that's inertia. An object in motion remains in motion until acted upon equal and opposite. But if he gets hit, kind of off to the side, he can turn, take that glancing blow, continue churning his legs and add extra yardage. And he does that pretty consistently. I don't think he's very good at east-west running. Like you got to get him a hole and let him run north-south. If you can get him in a zone scheme, let's go. He gets too patient sometimes. And when he does that, he gets caught in the backfield because he's not a jitterbug guy. He's a good straight line guy and go. So if he's waiting for that hole, sometimes you get attacked from the side and he's like, I'm done. And he does struggle to get outside of the tackles. But again, a lot size, speed, ability to catch passes, ability to take high volume of carries. If he goes in the first 3 rounds, I'm way in. And it was funny because I wasn't last year. I expected Zach Charbonnet to come out last year. I evaluated him last year, and then he went back to school. And he was okay. And I think he was probably my running back 5 last year, 4 or 5. I started again this year, evaluated the same set of film, looked back at my notes, and I was like, that's pretty similar. And then I started doing this senior year of Charbonnet.
Mm-hmm.
The change, the difference in the way he attacked, the speed, the acceleration, the understanding of where the hole is opening up and when to hit it was night and day. I was so surprised that he's right now my running back 3 behind Bijan Robinson and Gibbs. And I didn't expect it. It was, if you can imagine a 220-pound guy sneaking up on you, it happened.
Who's a player comp?
Man, I don't know. It's a little Melvin Gordon-y, I think. Like he's one of the he's just a real solid running back, and I think he's going to catch more passes than you expect.
All right. So the thing is, I don't know about you, but I chose a running back at 112. Get to that in just a second. And Charbonnet as well. It's kind of, we needed to come up with an exact name for these picks, but man, this tier is big. And even just the running back position, I think you can make an argument for probably about 5 other guys, right?
Yeah. And that's going to be the cool thing about this class is I love to pepper second round picks with running backs.
Yeah.
This class was designed for that.
Yep.
It absolutely was. There's so many there. There are another probably 5 running backs right now that we could be taking in these last 2 picks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. Every one of them is going to be rosterable, but I do think that you can kind of prioritize based on landing spot when the time comes. But as of now, just going off of talent, the information that we do have at hand, we're kind of going off of, which guys are the most talented and which guys do we think are most likely to go in that, second, third round sweet spot for running backs. So with that being said, at pick 112, I'm taking Zach Evans. Like I said, getting another running back in there. Not quite as big as Charbonnet, but certainly it still has kind of that prototypical 3-down stature, right?
Yeah, I mean, I get him listed at 5'11", 195. I think he'll come in a little bigger than that. And holy cow, does he have long speed? Like he's the player that he gets up to speed so fast he can house one anytime he touches it, which is wild. He's exceptional at the goal line, gets low and finds a way to get in the end zone, which you love as a running back. I mean, anytime you got a guy who teams trust at the goal line, that's 6 points is a lot on one play in fantasy. We'll take that. And he doesn't necessarily make defenders miss. So like he's not a shifty guy, but he's really good with angles once he gets into the second level. So he'll run away from players. So he doesn't necessarily have to make them miss. He's just like not in their vicinity. And he's got leg drive for days. And I talked about Zach Charbonnet not getting hit square. I don't think I saw Zach Evans get hit square one time, like not one run. I don't think anybody like stopped him dead. He always gets that angle so he can get more yardage, and he's carrying guys. I do think there may be ball control issues. Saw some fumbling. He carries it carelessly sometimes. Like he'll get out in one arm instead of when he's going to get hit instead of wrapping. But that's teachable. We can coach that. I do think he struggles to get outside, and he's really susceptible to guys getting low as the first tackler. So if a defender can get in through the hole and get down on his legs, he can be taken down. And I don't believe he's going to be a pass catcher. And people are going to come in and say he can catch pass. He can. I'm sure he can. But his season high is 12, and the NFL is not creative, and they look at that. And so it's going to be hard for me to see Zach Evans as a pass catcher, like a prolific pass catcher. But he could be a very good fantasy asset. And like you said, there are 5 or 6 guys. Charbonnet, Evans, you could substitute them in with 5 or 6 other running backs right here.
That's the thing. You and I have talked privately about the psychology, the psychology behind all of this. The way we kind of organize our thoughts, the way we view this stuff. And, so here we are. That was pick 112, natural conclusion to this episode. But, the interesting thing is, like I said, we're really kind of right in the middle of a tier. We're just going to kind of pick up with, in the next episode with the same type of players. And what I think is fascinating about it is the psychology behind it is, people are going to see the one at the beginning of that 112.
Yeah.
And they're going to value that significantly more than 201 just because of that, the break in between those 2 rounds. But the reality is you're going to get 201 so much cheaper than 112 in a trade, and you're going to get an identical player essentially.
Well, and this is my favorite part of rookie drafts is the second round. It's because I never have second round picks. And so what I do is I will identify the player that I want to go get. Let's just say I want to start off with Sean Tucker in the next round, just hypothetically. I can go and say, I'll give you next year's second and a fourth. And people go, whoa, a second and a fourth for a second, or a third if we have to go. That's fine. Second and a third for a second. And they'll do that. And I get exactly who I want. I love it. It's my favorite part of the draft. And this year, it's going to be so much fun. I may trade into it 2 or 3 times because there's so many running backs here that are going to get playing time in the NFL and are going to be productive for fantasy. It's going to be fun. They're not worth first round picks, but they're going to produce.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So with that being said, would Tucker be, if we were going to talk about, as soon as we close out this episode and, you're going to do the thing where you kind of cringe and say, I should have had this guy instead. Who is that player? Who did we snub?
I get two. I got one receiver and one running back that I really would have talked about, and one of them is Devin A-Chain, who is a running back from Texas A&M. Is very small. It's not a big snub. He's not a big guy, but man, pass catcher, can carry it, can roll up yards. And then the wide receiver that I think we snubbed is Josh Downs out of UNC, out of Carolina. I think he's going to be a fun wide receiver to talk about.
Nice. I think for me, it's probably going to be Michael Mayer, and kind of the issue that we're running into at tight end is it's getting really hard to navigate. Like, it looks like this is going to be another good class, kind of along the lines of what we had with Evan Ingram and David Njoku, OJ Howard. At least in terms of, projections and draft capital. Obviously, that class didn't end up being nearly the world beaters that we expected.
Kittle, baby.
Kittle. There's always Kittle. But, these guys don't necessarily have to hit for the NFL to view them as, potential. Like, there's several guys who could go in the first round. But, I look at the ability to produce fantasy points, and I just see Michael Mayer being a completely different player than the rest of a lot of these guys are going to be brought in to be kind of inline blockers just as much as route running pass catchers. Right. But I think that he's kind of one of those guys who, he might not even have his hand in the ground all that much. He's one of those guys that you kind of line him up in the slot. It's about as close as we've got to a Kyle Pitts. It's not that level of prospect, but much closer than anything that we've had since Pitts.
Yeah, and I can't call him a snub because I won't take tight ends in the first round of a rookie draft. The only Pitts is the exception, and for the same reason you take Bijan Robinson at 1, because everybody else said you take Pitts at high, and you could get a haul for him. I will not take tight because we don't know as much as we think we do about tight ends, but everything you just said about Mayer is absolutely right, and we've seen him coming for ever, like since he came into college. And so I agree with you. He's got to be in the conversation in the next, for the next pick. He does.
What about the biggest value? Are we gonna cop out and say Bijan Robinson? Like, it's tempting, right? Because again, you ended up with 101. You didn't do anything to get 101. Right. You just somebody had to get it. It ended up being you because you had the worst season, if you traded for 101, you had to give up a lot to do it. And that price tag is only going up. But, if you if you earned 101 to get a player like Bijan Robinson, who you could really make an argument for as being a first round startup pick, and you didn't have to do anything, like, that's kind of the definition of value. But should we maybe finesse this a little bit better than that?
I'll give you the guy that I love where I got him is Jordan Addison. Because Jordan Addison and Jaxon Smith-Njigba to me are neck and neck in terms of their prospects. And some people have Addison higher. Like, I've seen that with people that I respect and listen to. And so getting him at 107 to me feels like a steal. But you're going to get a lot of that with this class.
Yep. For me, I think it's probably Kayshon Boutte. Like, it's also the riskiest pick I think either of us made. Although, Anthony Richardson 4th overall that's risky, but like, that's also, again, if he goes in the first round of the NFL draft, you're getting some job security and you're going to get some rushing upside along the way. So even in the worst case scenario, he's startable in Superflex. So I feel good about that one. There's just such a wide range of outcomes at this point for Kayshon Boutte.
Yeah. Well, but you got to swing for the fence. I mean, that's the name of the game in fantasy, and people get so caught up in like floor plays and being safe. And if you look at the team that won your league, if you look year over year at the team that won your league, it's the team that is taking risks to have that high ceiling, because the high ceiling is what wins. The floor, it is what it is. And getting Kayshon Boutte, who could be the best wide receiver in this class, down at 110, yeah, that's a swing.
Yep. Man, that's a pretty tight first round. But like I said, I mean, we've got a lot more players to talk about. So what do you say we come back here next week, same time, same place, and mock out a second round as well?
I will absolutely be here.
Nice. Tacit Assassin Zach Reed in the house from the Dynasty Dummies. Hootenanny's starting up. I mean, probably within next week or so.
Thursday.
Right? Yeah, there you go. There you go. By the time this comes out, Hootenanny is probably a sleep or two away. And then I'm as Superflex Dude on Twitter.